2. Fully awoke to body's wondrous truths. He cuts off Mara, returns to the root, and joins primal spirit. Now we were speaking of the handsome Monkey King who, having received his name, jumped about joyfully and went forward to give Subodhi his grateful salutation. The patriarch then ordered the congregation to lead Sun Wukong outdoors, and to teach him how to sprinkle water on the ground and dust, and how to speak and move with proper courtesy. The company of immortals obediently went outside with Wukong, who then bowed to his fellow students. They prepared thereafter a place in the corridor where he might sleep. Next morning he began to learn from his schoolmates the arts of language and etiquette. He discussed with them the scriptures and the doctrines. He practiced calligraphy and burned incense. Such was his daily routine. In more leisurely moments he would be sweeping the grounds or hoeing the garden, planting flowers or pruning trees, gathering firewood or lighting fires, fetching water or carrying drinks. He did not lack for whatever he needed, and thus he lived in the cave without realizing that 6 or 7 years had slipped by. One day the patriarch ascended the platform and took his high seat. Calling together all the immortals, he began to lecture on a great doctrine. He spoke with words so florid and eloquent that gold lotus sprang up from the ground. The doctrine of 3 vehicles he subtly rehearsed, including even the law's minutest tittle. The yak's tail waved slowly and spouted elegance. His thunderous voice moved e'en the 9th heaven. For a while he lectured on Tao. For a while he spoke on Chan. To harmonize the 3 parties is a natural thing. One word's elucidation filled with truth points to the birthless, showing nature's mystery. Wukong, who was standing there and listening, was so pleased with the talk that he scratched his ear and rubbed his jaw. Grinning from ear to ear, he could not refrain from dancing on all fours. Suddenly the patriarch saw this and called out to him, "Why are you madly jumping and dancing in the ranks and not listening to my lecture?" Wukong said, "Your pupil was devoutly listening to the lecture. But when I heard such wonderful things from my reverend master, I couldn't contain myself for joy, and started to leap and prance about quite unconsciously. May the master forgive my sins. Let me ask you," said the patriarch, "if you comprehend these wonderful things, do you know how long you have been in this cave?" Wukong said, "Your pupil is basically feeble-minded, and does not know the number of seasons. I only remember that whenever the fire burned out in the stove, I would go to the back of the mountain to gather firewood. Finding a mountainful of fine peach trees there, I have eaten my fill of peaches 7 times. The patriarch said, "That mountain is named the Ripe Peach Mountain. If you have eaten your fill 7 times, I suppose it must have been 7 years. What kind of Taoist art would you like to learn from me?" Wukong said, "I am dependent on the admonition of my honored teacher. Your pupil would gladly learn whatever has a smidgen of Taoist flavor." The patriarch said, "Within the tradition of Tao, there are 360 heteronymous divisions, all the practices of which may result in illumination. I don't know which division you would like to follow. I am dependent on the will of my honored teacher," said Wukong. "Your pupil is wholeheartedly obedient. How would it be," said the patriarch, "if I taught you the practice of the method division?" Wukong asked, "How would you explain the practice of the method division?" "The practice of the method division," said the patriarch, "consists of summoning immortals and working the planchette, of divination by manipulating yarrow stalks, and of learning the secrets of pursuing good and avoiding evil." "Can this sort of practice lead to immortality?" asked Wukong. "Impossible. Impossible," said the patriarch. "I won't learn it then." Wukong said, "How would it be?" said the patriarch again, "if I taught you the practice of the school's division?" "What is the meaning of the school's division?" asked Wukong. "The school's division," the patriarch said, "includes the Confucians, the Buddhists, the Taoists, the dualists, the Mohists, and the physicians. They read scriptures or recite prayers. They interview priests or conjure up saints and the like. Can this sort of practice lead to immortality? Asked Wukong. The patriarch said, if immortality is what you desire, this practice is like setting a pillar inside a wall. Wukong said, Master, I'm a simple fellow and I don't know the idioms of the marketplace. What's setting a pillar inside a wall? The patriarch said, when people build houses and want them to be sturdy, they place a pillar as a prop inside the wall. But someday the big mansion will decay, and the pillar too will rot. What you're saying then? Wukong said, is that it is not long-lasting. I'm not going to learn this. The patriarch said, how would it be if I taught you the practice of the silence division? What's the aim of the silence division? Wukong asked. To cultivate fasting and abstinence. Said the patriarch. Quiescence and inactivity, meditation, and the art of cross-legged sitting, restraint of language, and a vegetarian diet. There are also the practices of yoga, exercises standing or prostrate, entrance into complete stillness, contemplation in solitary confinement, and the like. Can these activities, asked Wukong, bring about immortality? They are no better than the unfired bricks on the kiln. Said the patriarch. Wukong laughed and said, Master indeed loves to beat about the bush. Haven't I just told you that I don't know these idioms of the marketplace? What do you mean by the unfired bricks on the kiln? The patriarch replied, the tiles and the bricks on the kiln may have been molded into shape, but if they have not been refined by water and fire, a heavy rain will one day make them crumble. So this too lacks permanence. Said Wukong. I don't want to learn it. The patriarch said, how would it be if I taught you the practice of the action division? What's it like in the action division? Wukong asked. Plenty of activities. Said the patriarch. Such as gathering the yin to nourish the yang, bending the bow and treading the arrow, and rubbing the navel to pass breath. There are also experimentation with alchemical formulas, burning rushes and forging cauldrons, taking red lead, making autumn stone, and drinking bride's milk and the like. Can such bring about long life? Asked Wukong. To obtain immortality from such activities, said the patriarch, is also like scooping the moon from the water. There you go again, master, cried Wukong. What do you mean by scooping the moon from the water? The patriarch said, when the moon is high in the sky, its reflection is in the water. Although it is visible therein, you cannot scoop it out or catch hold of it, for it is but an illusion. I won't learn that either, said Wukong. When the patriarch heard this, he uttered a cry and jumped down from the high platform. He pointed the ruler he held in his hands at Wukong and said to him, what a mischievous monkey you are. You won't learn this and you won't learn that. Just what is it that you are waiting for? Moving forward, he hit Wukong 3 times on the head. Then he folded his arms behind his back and walked inside, closing the main doors behind him and leaving the congregation stranded outside. Those who were listening to the lecture were so terrified that everyone began to berate Wukong. You reckless ape! They cried. You're utterly without manners. The master was prepared to teach you magic secrets. Why weren't you willing to learn? Why did you have to argue with him instead? Now you have offended him, and who knows when he'll come out again. At that moment they all resented him and despised and ridiculed him. But Wukong was not angered in the least and only replied with a broad grin. For the Monkey King, in fact, had already solved secretly, as it were, the riddle in the pot. He therefore did not quarrel with the other people but patiently held his tongue. He reasoned that the master, by hitting him 3 times, was telling him to prepare himself for the 3rd watch. And by folding his arms behind his back, walking inside, and closing the main doors, was telling him to enter by the back door so that he might receive instruction in secret. Wukong spent the rest of the day happily with the other pupils in front of the divine cave of the 3 stars, eagerly waiting for the night. When evening arrived, he immediately retired with all the others, pretending to be asleep by closing his eyes, breathing evenly, and remaining completely still. Since there was no watchman in the mountain to beat the watch or call the hour, he could not tell what time it was. He could only rely on his own calculations by counting the breaths he inhaled and exhaled. Approximately at the hour of Z, he arose very quietly and put on his clothes. Stealthily opening the front door, he slipped away from the crowd and walked outside. Lifting his head, he saw the bright moon and the cool, clear dew, though in each corner not one speck of dust. Sheltered fowls roosted in the woods. A brook flowed gently from its source. Darting fireflies dispersed the gloom. Wild geese spread word columns through the clouds. Precisely, it was the third watch hour. Time to seek the way whole and true. You see him following the familiar path back to the rear entrance, where he discovered that the door was, indeed, ajar. Wukong said happily. The Reverend Master truly intended to give me instruction. That's why the door was left open. He reached the door in a few large strides and entered sideways. Walking up to the patriarch's bed, he found him asleep with his body curled up, facing the wall. Wukong dared not disturb him. Instead, he knelt before his bed. After a little while, the patriarch awoke. Stretching his legs, he recited to himself, "Hard, hard, hard. The way is most obscure.